not every death on a battlefield comes from the other side. In Vietnam, American platoons were found lying where they fell in the jungle beside M16s that had been stripped apart in desperation. When their rifles would no longer fire, they had to fight on with anything they could grab. Pistols, M79s, even enemy weapons. The story of the M16 in Vietnam is not just about a new rifle being issued. It's about what happens when a soldier's trust in the weapon in his hands is betrayed. For years, those details lived mostly in veterans' reunions, rarely appearing in official reports. In this video, we're going to roll the tape all the way back to the start, why the M16 was chosen, how it was tweaked on its way to the battlefield, and why decisions that looked like mere technical or logistical adjustments on paper carved very real scars into the men who had to carry that rifle into combat. But before we follow the M16's trail into the jungles of Vietnam, we have to go back to the starting point, the path the United States took with its small arms after 1945. After World War II, an American platoon basically looked like a miniature weapons zoo. In the same unit, you had Barr's M1 Garands and M19 on 19s all firing .30-06. Next to them, Thompson and M3 submachine guns firing .45 ACP, and then the M1 carbine with its own .30 carbine round. On screen, you can imagine a simple chart, each gun as a little icon, with its caliber written beside it. Just looking at that is enough to feel the logistical headache. The Army had to produce, maintain, and supply multiple different weapons magazines and spare parts, had to train soldiers on each separate system, and had to make sure the right ammo showed up at the right place at the right time. Out of that mess came the idea of one cartridge. For everything, the US and NATO wanted a common caliber and a standardized family of weapons. The result was the 7.6251 NATO round and the M14, essentially an upgraded M1 Garand with a 20-round magazine and full auto capability. On paper, it looked perfect. Out in the field, it turned out to be too long, too heavy, and almost impossible to control on full automatic. To understand why the M16 was so different from earlier rifles, we have to go back to a quiet revolution in how the US military thought about infantry firepower. From World War II, combat data analysts saw that most engagements happened under 300 yards. And at those distances, soldiers often missed even though their rifles were theoretically accurate far beyond that. Submachine guns were devastating under 50 meters, but faded quickly at range, while full-power .30 caliber rifles were overkill at medium range, kicked hard, weighed a lot, and limited how much ammo a man could carry. That raised an uncomfortable question: did every soldier really need an ultra-powerful cartridge? Or did they need more lighter rounds with less recoil to boost their hit probability? Project Salvo shifted the focus from the power of a single shot to the number of shots that actually hit. Engineer Eugene entered the picture with the AR-10 aluminum receiver, plastic furniture, straight-line design, and a gas system that reduced recoil. When the concept shifted to a smaller 2223 Rem 5.56mm cartridge, a light, very fast bullet that was easy to control and allowed soldiers to carry much more ammo, the AR-15 was born as a scaled-down AR-10. It weighed under 7 pounds, had a 20-inch barrel, a muzzle velocity, around 200 feet per second, and produced wounds on the battlefield that were anything but mild compared to 7.62. From the AR-15 design, once refined and standardized, the United States got the M16, a rifle introduced as the infantryman's weapon of the future. On paper, it was the dream solution for the Army Light Compact optimized for engagements under 300 yards. Exactly the kind of fighting they expected in future wars. One standard rifle to replace the old weapon zoo, simplifying training logistics and maintenance all at once. The new 5.56mm cartridge was so light that a single soldier could carry nearly 3 times as many rounds as before with 7.62, which in theory meant they could stay in the fight longer and maneuver more aggressively. In that context, the M14 quickly became the shortest-lived standard-issue rifle in U.S. history, quietly pushed aside by the M16. But just when all the reports said things were fine, the first bursts of gunfire in Vietnam started telling a very different story. And that was where theory collided with the reality of war. Before it became the center of a storm, the M16 actually had a genuine honeymoon phase in Vietnam. The first rifles were issued to American advisors and elite South Vietnamese units, and the initial feedback was almost all praise. Soldiers in the field said the M16 was much lighter, making long patrols far less exhausting than with the M14. Chamber around aim squeezed the trigger. It felt smooth, easy to keep on target. The plastic and aluminum parts didn't warp or swell with moisture like wood stocks did, which made the rifle feel perfectly suited to the hot, humid climate. In the test reports, malfunction rates were extremely low. Some units fired thousands of rounds with no serious problems. Back in Washington, many people believed they had finally found the ideal choice for the next generation of infantry weapons. As the war escalated in the mid-1960s, those glowing reports were enough to unlock large procurement orders, and tens of thousands of M16s began rolling off the production lines ready to flood into combat units. Young American soldiers stepped off the plains in Vietnam with a very clear belief in their hands was the rifle of the future. They were told the M16 was light, accurate, modern, and would give them an edge. But on some of their very first patrols through jungle and rice paddies, that confidence began to crack. After a few magazines, an M16 would fail to chamber a new round, spent cases would jam solid, or the rifle would fall silent at the exact moment it was needed most. Some men had to grab the weapon of a fallen buddy just to keep firing, only for that rifle to jam as well. In some engagements, up to a third of the rifles in a platoon malfunctioned in a single contact with the enemy. When the fighting closed to short-range combat suddenly meant bayonets, rifle butts, sidearms, or whatever AK they could snatch. From then on, many tried to hang on to older weapons, and no longer saw the M16 as something they could truly rely on. One of the closest roots of the M16 disaster lay in a piece of very fashionable marketing at the time: the self-cleaning rifle, a weapon that supposedly needed almost no maintenance. From Colt's literature to some army materials, that point was hammered home. The result was that the M16 was thrown straight into a hot, humid jungle war in Vietnam, without a proper support system for cleaning and upkeep. Many units had no adequate 5.56 specific cleaning kits. Soldiers resorted to using aviation fuel to wipe down their rifles, or even wrote home asking their families to send cleaning rods and oil to the front. There's a story of one soldier carrying the only cleaning rod in the unit, running between fighting positions to clear stuck cases for his buddies in the middle of a firefight, until he never came back. With unchromed chambers, rust and pitting appeared quickly. Failure to extract, cases swelling and sticking in the chamber, the extractor claw ripping the rim without pulling the brass out, became a recurring nightmare even for men who tried their best to keep their rifles as clean as possible. In the original test, the AR-15 ran smoothly with stick powder IMR 4475. It burned cleanly, left little residue, and matched what Stoner had designed the system around. But in 1964, far from the battlefield, the ordnance bureaucracy quietly decided to switch to a different ball powder, WC-846, cheaper and conveniently available in bulk from World War II stockpiles. The problem was that its burn characteristics were completely different. Port pressure went up, the cyclic rate increased, and a lot more fouling was blown back into the chamber and gas system. No one asked Stoner. No one retuned the weapon to match the new powder. That configuration was simply dumped into a hot, wet jungle with unchromed chambers and no proper cleaning gear, and the self-cleaning rifle quickly turned into a danger in the hands of the very men it was supposed to protect. Instead of fixing the root cause, ordnance forced the addition of a forward assist, while the cheap 20-round magazines became the final weak link that soldiers themselves had to figure out how to work around. From the hills and jungles of Vietnam, letters and after-action reports started pouring back from platoons and companies. The M16 jammed. The M16 failed to fire. Men fell with the very rifle they had been promised was the most modern in the world, lying useless beside them. At first, many people at home assumed this was just frontline griping. But then the American press got involved. Articles about Marines being killed because their rifles jammed in the middle of firefights forced the entire country to pay attention. From the newspapers, the story marched straight into congressional hearings. Under the glare of cameras and spotlights, lawmakers grilled generals and officials. Why are the weapons we issue ourselves putting our soldiers in danger? By that point, the Army could no longer dismiss it as rumor. The M16 affair had become a real crisis, part technical problem, part fracture of trust between the soldier and the system that armed him. Once the reports of jams and casualties flooded in from Vietnam, The rescue mission for the M16 began in full-on damage control mode. The U.S. Army rushed proper cleaning kits and gun oil to the field and added a small storage compartment in the buttstock so every soldier would always carry his cleaning gear. The little trapdoor many veterans still remember. On the drawing board, engineers chromed the chamber, then the entire bore adjusted the gas port buffer and spring to bring the rate of fire back into the intended range, and replaced the open three-prong flash hider that snagged on vegetation with the more enclosed birdcage type. The propellant issue was rewritten as well. New loads were developed with just enough velocity, less fouling, and revised ball powders to reduce residue. Magazines were improved too, from troublesome 20-rounders to more reliable 25 and then 30-round versions. In tests with the correct ammunition and configuration, the nightmare jam rates nearly disappeared. By the end of the Vietnam War, the M16A1 was in practice a very different rifle from the early models that soldiers had once cursed. When units that deployed later to Vietnam received the M16A1, many of those soldiers found it to be a normal rifle-light, accurate, and reasonably reliable if you took proper care of it. For them, the M16 was a tool, not a horror story. But for the first waves, the memories were completely different to get to that fixed version men had died on ridgelines and in the jungle with jammed rifles in their hands. When Congress dug into the issue, they uncovered a whole chain of failures, sloppy testing, unannounced powder changes, and overlapping interests behind key decisions. And yet no one was prosecuted. No general or official is formally remembered as having lost their position solely because of the M16 scandal. Once cured, the M16 went on to become the backbone of the U.S. infantry, and its direct descendant, the M4, is still in service today. And that is where the ethical question comes in. If a rifle that once left entire platoons dead because of jams can be redeemed without anyone being held accountable, then how many other decisions have cost lives that we will never hear about? How many human beings were gambled away because something was more convenient for logistics or a bit cheaper on the balance sheet? In reports, files, and charts, the soldier is always just a number. But on the battlefield, every number has a name, a family, a life, cut short. As we close, we return to the opening image, an American platoon lying still in the forest, surrounded by M16s torn apart and abandoned mid-fight. This isn't just a story about engineering. It's a story about trust. The trust a soldier places in whatever he's holding in his hands. If you put yourself back in that moment with the life experience and things you've seen over the last half-century, what do you think? If you were a young soldier in Vietnam, would you have been able to fully trust the M16? And in your view, was this whole tragedy mainly the result of bureaucracy and decisions made far from the battlefield, or can it be seen as a kind of self-inflicted wound from within the system itself? Share your thoughts in the comments, especially if your family, your relatives, or you yourself have memories connected to this period.